What I would probably focus on in this room would be the work that as a kind of one of the things that I've just written for a book in America was called Beyond the Viewer, and it's about how going to art galleries now is less about looking and more about interacting, participating, figuring in the work in some way, and how often that means that even if you're faced with an object or a series of objects, your job isn't necessarily to look at them. And Liam Gillick, in his most recent catalogue, wrote that he's quite happy people go to his shows, turn their back to the work and have a conversation. So it's about not being a viewer and not putting yourself in that position to be a viewer. So if I was going to talk about those kinds of ideas in relationship to this show, then I would probably focus on the bubblegum jacket stroke performance stroke video. That'd be quite an interesting way of thinking about various kinds of interactions that occur. You know, because we can see the jacket as sculpture, if you like, being used both as clothing and then being handed over to somebody physically picking it up. So then there, if you like, is the first public of that work before it even gets to the gallery. So I'd be kind of talking about those kinds of ideas. And I think that that's a really interesting piece for talking about new ways of engaging. Should we go over there? So because the way I described as a critic, if I was a critic writing about this, I'd have my own agenda. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that agenda was to do with engaging with art beyond being a viewer. Then I'd be able to talk about this jacket as something that, even if you do look at it, it's also got other possibilities, such as wearing it, or having it handed to you, or maybe of even it being kind of invisible in the way that we were talking about this morning, when it was hung there while people were putting their works in the space, and because it was faced the other way, people didn't know whether it was a piece of work or not. So it's kind of utterly invisible in that sense. It didn't seem like something to look at. And if you look at the video, quite a lot of the time it's underneath another coat. So again, it's not to be looked at. And then the visual bit where the gum is, it's on the inside, so you don't see it. And in a sense, you kind of notice it first inside the video when someone touches it, rather than when someone sees it. And I've not seen anyone in the video, once they felt the gum, then lift it up to look at it. They kind of just ignored it and put it on the hanger and then walked off. So it doesn't really get looked at until it gets into the gallery, and then it gets looked at in relationship to all this other activity that's going on around it. So it seems to me that it's a very, not only is it an interesting work and an interesting performance, and it opens up all kinds of questions about who we might be when we go to an art gallery. It does that really interestingly for me through the combination of the video and the jacket being together. Because to a certain extent, even though I'm talking about this as not being something you look at, it'd be very, very difficult, I think, to understand what's going on in the video. You wouldn't be able to see what was going on if we didn't have the jacket here to show us what was being passed about. So therefore the jacket, if you like, is less an art object and more a kind of a key to a map, if you like. It's the information, the evidence that allows you to see why these things are going on in the video. So it ends up having a kind of secondary role. It's like an explanation or a title, or it's like one of those kinds of, when you get a catalogue and it's got an interview with the artist, and the interview tells you what's going on in the work, and then you suddenly understand the work because of what you just read. I think that the jacket performs that kind of function in this space, telling you what's going on in the video. So that's a very interesting relationship for me, thinking about engaging with art in in a way that's not primarily visual. The most visual part of the piece is really a secondary thing. So that would probably be the piece that I would focus on most if I was writing something about this show.
There's a bit of a reversal from we're used to seeing objects in shows that are vestiges of performances, like Joseph Beuys's Vitrines, interesting objects which have an aura because we know they were used in a performance. But this is an interesting sort of shift on that, I think, because what we're watching is like a prequel to the piece having a place within the exhibition. I think it's an interesting turnaround timing.
Yeah, and also the jacket is entirely the way that it was before he even did the performance. So this is how it was, and this is how it still is. So, like, in a sense, it's not the leftovers of some event, because the event took place after it was made, and it didn't significantly change it. So it's not that kind of trace. You know, performers often talk about traces. You know, like if Gary was that way inclined, he'd talk about the traces left of his actions by the fact that the paint has gone onto the floor because he stood up. You know, so that would be a kind of typical performative trace. But this isn't that kind of trace, it's already made. So there's an interesting, unusual relationship for a prop to have within a video.
It's interesting how it takes on that kind of relationship to the object there, and in kind of using this kind of colour, it's, you know, it's kind of shifting things all the time between patterns, decoration, something that you would want on the surface of a jacket, or that desire for something, but it's kind of negated again through this kind of use of gum. But it's also being allowed to sort of inhabit a number of spaces at once. And that's what I find really enjoyable about it, because on its own, yes, you kind of think, oh, that's a kind of interesting relationship to that kind of making. But then we have this other kind of space, and then these other kinds of questions that sort of these kind of spaces to do with our own experience, and then the experience of something that is an object, that has a surface, has a kind of connection with our relationship to art.
Well, I think, well, when I look at this, the jacket comes to life because it's like being on this trip. You know, something's happened to it, it's gone somewhere and been part of some event and then come back. And so it's like when you're faced with an artwork and then somebody tells you how they made it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, that's so much more interesting than it looks. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's really interesting as well. There's lots, a number of people actually kind of go to great lengths to make something, but you don't know what's happened to make that thing.
It's a bit like Starling's Spike, with, you know, being around that.
Yeah. And the story is really important part of what you're looking
at. And looking at it and knowing that had done that.
But in a sense, that's what links his work up to conceptualism, is that the story can't be seen in the object. It has to be added to it, because there's no way of telling where it's been or what it's done. So that has to be added in language. And that happens all the time. That's normal, because people, you know, give interviews about their work and tell you things that you can't necessarily see. But in some artworks, it's like really, really vital.
I think we could usefully sort of add in some sort of talk about work and redundancy. I mean, there's a number of things in the show that, as we're looking at now, are left over after something has happened, or never actually moved in the first place, but look as if they should have moved. And so there's a sort of feeling of quite a positive feeling of absence, or something something happening somewhere else. And the jacket forms a sort of metaphor for that. Like you go to work and you take off your coat and you hang it up, and then you go off somewhere else to do a job or something. It has that feeling about it.